There's a bird that saved 194 American soldiers, can detect cancer better than most lab technicians, and was trusted by kings, emperors, and Charles Darwin. You probably took one out of your way this morning. The pigeon, America's most hated bird, and the one most often the target of lies. Here's the part nobody mentions. Pigeons didn't choose to be here. French colonists brought them across the Atlantic in 1606 as food, as messengers, as property. For 3 centuries, Americans raised them, used them in races, depended on them. Then, the moment they stopped being useful, we turned against them. Rats with wings, the phrase that buried them, wasn't science. It wasn't even popular opinion. It was uttered only once by a New York City Parks Commissioner in June 1966 during a litter complaint. A single quote. 6 decades of reputation destroyed. Herald Standard. And the cruelest part? Pigeons trust humans because they were bred over thousands of years precisely to do so. We programmed them for it, and then we call them pests.
In October 1918, 554 American soldiers were trapped behind enemy lines in the forests of France. They had no food, no ammunition, and to make matters worse, their own artillery was mistakenly bombarding them. They had only one option left: a pigeon. Major Charles Whittlesey scribbled a desperate note. "We are on the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is launching a barrage directly at us. For God's sake, stop it." He attached the note to the bird's leg and released it under open fire. The Germans saw the pigeon take flight and open fire. It was hit in the chest. Its leg, the one carrying the message, was almost torn off. It fell. And then, somehow, it got up. That bird flew 40 kilometers in 25 minutes, arriving at headquarters with the message still attached to the ligament of its fractured leg. The bombardment ceased. 194 men emerged alive from that forest. His name was Cher Ami. He's at the Smithsonian now, standing on the carved wooden leg soldiers made for him. The French government awarded him its highest military honor, the Croix de Guerre. General Pershing personally said, "There's nothing the United States can do too much for this bird." And Cher Ami wasn't alone. During World War II, a pigeon named G.I. Joe flew 20 miles in 20 minutes to thwart an Allied air raid on a town already occupied by British troops. He is credited with saving at least 1,000 lives. In total, 32 pigeons received the Dickin Medal, the highest honor bestowed upon animals in combat. Their success rate in delivering messages on the battlefield was 95%. 95% in the midst of war, through gunfire, poison gas, and trained enemy falcons sent specifically to intercept them. These are the animals we chase away from park benches.
Here's something researchers have spent decades trying to unravel and still can't fully explain. Release a pigeon 640 kilometers from home, blindfolded for the entire journey. Rotate the cage so it completely loses its sense of direction. Even so, it will find its way back. Nobody knows exactly how. Scientists have debated pigeon navigation for decades. The main theories involve magnetic fields, infrared sound maps, and possibly smell. But no one has reached a consensus. A researcher at Bowling Green State University, who has dedicated his career to studying this problem, admitted that the mystery may never be fully solved. A bird that has lived alongside humans for 10,000 years, and we still can't explain its most basic ability. But navigation is just the beginning. Pigeons were trained by the U.S. Coast Guard to identify orange life jackets on shipwrecked sailors from helicopters. They can recognize all 26 letters of the English alphabet. And in 2015, scientists at UC Davis discovered something that truly surprised the scientific community. Pigeons could be trained to detect breast cancer in tissue samples. Individually, their diagnostic accuracy reached 85%. When researchers combined the verdicts of just 4 birds, the accuracy rose to 99%, matching the performance of a trained pathologist. A flock of pigeons, collectively, diagnosing cancer with the same accuracy as a doctor. And there's more. A team from Keio University discovered that pigeons demonstrate self-recognition abilities that surpass those of 3-year-old children. That's right, it's not a typo. The bird you consider a nuisance outperforms a young child in certain cognitive tests. Scientists also don't know exactly what to make of this information. What we do know is that pigeon intelligence is unlike ours. It doesn't use the same brain structures, it doesn't follow the same pathways, but results keep emerging, laboratory after laboratory, decade after decade. A type of intelligence that works differently, is deeper than anyone expected, and is still, in many respects, a mystery.
Think about what it really means to domesticate an animal. You take generations of wild creatures and selectively breed them for temperament, for trust, for dependence on humans. You reshape their instincts over thousands of years until the animal that exists can no longer function without you. You build a relationship so deep that it becomes ingrained in their DNA. And then you decide you don't need them anymore, and you walk away. That's exactly what happened with pigeons. They approach humans and beg for food because that's the only survival skill left in their genes. They love us because we've bred them to feel that way. And yet, we hate them. This isn't a metaphor. It's biology. Wild pigeons share a strong genetic resemblance with homing pigeons. Most urban pigeons descend from racing birds that couldn't find their way home or were simply abandoned when their owners dismantled the pigeon lofts and left. The birds didn't escape to the wild. There is no wildness for them to escape to. They ended up on city streets because that's where humans left them. And city streets, with their concrete parapets and windows, are like cliffs, the only habitat their ancestral instincts recognize. So they stayed and waited and kept approaching people. Pigeons were kept as pets, bred for their beauty, used in sporting races, until the early 1960s, when their reputation began to change. Cell phones and mass communication made them obsolete, too dirty to be pets, too inconvenient to be useful. They were discarded. 10,000 years of partnership ended in a decade. And the animal that couldn't survive without us didn't go away. It simply moved to the sidewalk in front of our buildings, eating the scraps we throw away, nesting on the edges we never look at, continuing to do the only thing it was taught to do. Trust us.
Let's talk about the only argument that still makes people feel justified. The droppings. The disease. The idea that pigeons pose a real threat to public health, that they are dangerously dirty, that walking near one is somehow a risk. Here's what really happened. In the 1950s, pigeons became associated with disease in the press. By 1963, authorities were describing them as menacing pests. And then, in June 1966, a meningitis outbreak in New York City gave Thomas Hoving the opportunity he needed. He blamed the pigeons. No studies, no evidence, just a frustrated bureaucrat pointing to the most visible animal in the park. That was enough. The narrative that pigeons were disease-carrying pests spread rapidly, amplified, according to researchers, largely by misinformation disseminated by pest control companies promoting their products. It was a business, and it worked. But here's what science really says. Pigeons are not harmful to human health unless you have a severely compromised immune system. And unlike rats, the animal they are constantly compared to, pigeons do not seek out human dwellings, do not contaminate food supplies, and do not transmit leptospirosis. They also do not displace native species. You won't find them in the wild driving out other birds. They stay where we are, because we are all they have ever known. And the comparison to diseases that bothers you most? Pigeons transmit diseases to healthy humans at a lower rate than common pets and backyard chickens. The animal you fear poses less of a health risk than the one sleeping at the foot of your bed. Nobody talks about that.
So, the next time a pigeon walks toward you on the sidewalk, and it will, because that's what they do, wait a second before shooing it away. This bird is a product of 10,000 years of human history. It carried messages for Julius Caesar, for Genghis Khan, for the United States Army. It flew through gunfire with a severed leg to save men who otherwise would not have returned home. It has been in laboratories and, together with doctors, detected cancer. It has been painted, used in races, celebrated, and kept by kings. And then came smartphones, and we threw everything away as if it were a broken tool. The pigeon tells a story about the history of humanity, its movements, and how we relate to animals. Every urban pigeon you've ever seen is a mongrel, a mix of breeds developed over centuries, carrying the genetics of birds that crossed oceans, survived wars, and resisted all attempts at extermination. Not because they are pests, but because they are extraordinarily good at the one thing they were made for: living alongside us. The hatred was never really against the bird. Sociologists who studied the subject discovered that the pigeon's true offense was visibility, being present in spaces that humans considered exclusively theirs. Dirt was a social category even before it was biological. We needed something to blame for the appearance of cities, and the pigeon was already there. It's still there, patient, unhurried, walking in that small swaying circle it always makes, waiting for someone to notice it. Here's a question worth reflecting on. If we were able to do this with the pigeon, an animal that saved our soldiers, served our scientists, and trusted us completely, what does that say about how we treat things we decide we no longer need?